G'day, Binantians, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Boys Down Bad podcast. My name is Liam, Lost It All O'Doherty. I'm here with Tom. Oh God, it's all gone, Mitchelhill. Mate, how you feeling after this week's market action?
Mate, well, it's not fantastic, is it? The vibes are not immaculate, but just making it through. We'll be all right.
Yeah, just got to keep on stacking, hey? Well, yeah, it was a pretty crazy week. Last Friday, we had the strategic Bitcoin reserve and the digital asset stockpile signed into existence officially by executive order by number one, Mr. Donald Trump, US President Donald Trump. And you would have thought that that was a reason for our bags to be going up, but instead we saw some pretty significant action to the downside. But yeah, I mean, what can you do? This is crypto, and sometimes it doesn't go the way that you think it's going to. But let's talk about the bullish side of this news first, Tom. I would love you to give us a bit of an overview of what the strategic Bitcoin actually is and what happened last Friday.
Okay. So, yeah, it was a little underwhelming when it came out. I think the market was very much expecting a strategic Bitcoin reserve to look something like the United States government saying, hey, we're going to buy up lots of Bitcoin and, increase the reserve that way. What actually happened was the strategic Bitcoin reserve that came out essentially said, oh, yeah, we're going to stockpile it, but we're not going to buy anymore at the current rate. They said something around finding like a delta neutral strategy to acquire Bitcoin or something along those lines. So it's definitely not the stuff that we or the market was hoping for, that really bullish announcement. But the US government has, I think it's around about 200,000, 198,000 at the moment, Bitcoin, which is around about $16.5 billion. So yeah, they're essentially saying that they're never going to sell that Bitcoin. David Sachs, love him or hate him, put out a thing talking about how much money the US had lost by selling Bitcoin too early. Same with a couple of other nation states as well. So yeah, there's that with the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And, longer term, that looks like a good thing. I don't really know, what will change moving forward, but the idea of the fact that the US government is essentially saying, hey, we're actually going to hold this and never sell it. They're hodling. You can't complain too much about that. But yeah, it's definitely not the stimulus that the market was hoping for.
Yep. And there was always like a mini dump whenever the US government moved Bitcoin around or moved Bitcoin to an exchange. It always seemed to be a bit of a fear point, or we always saw a bit of FUD around that. So maybe we lose that excuse to have a bit of a pullback on the day-to-day. But yeah, definitely. I think Lummis's bill is still alive. And I read this morning there were 12 US politicians who are now backing that. So the dream of the US buying a lot of Bitcoin, I think, is still alive. And those cost neutral strategies are going to be really interesting to see what they end up bringing out to try and acquire more Bitcoin. And the sense that I get is that there is appetite to acquire more Bitcoin, even at a cost neutral strategy. So yeah, I don't know if the market's just a little bit overly bearish about this, but yeah, what about the digital asset stockpile side of things? What can you tell us about that update? And maybe that was what caused the market to be a bit more bearish.
I think that's kind of what freaked everyone out of like, hey guys, we're going to have a digital asset stockpile. I think everyone would like their bags to be included, funnily enough. Like CT, crypto Twitter is probably not the best place to go to for sentiment on that. Of like, nah, my altcoin wasn't included in the US government's stockpile, damn it. But with that, I think, Bitcoin is in a league of its own now with the government. And I think the main thing that you have to remember with the digital asset stockpile, which at the moment is Ether, Solana, XRP, and Cardano, which, Cardano inclusion and XRP inclusion, I think, got a lot of more crypto natives ruffled. Like, what? What are they doing buying that? But I think the key thing to remember with that is that unlike a Bitcoin strategic reserve, which is essentially the government saying, hey, we're never going to sell this, They've never clarified whether or not they're going to rebalance that, whether they're going to sell assets in and out of that. They also haven't really clarified how they're going to purchase the assets, which ones will be included over time. So it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. I think that ETH and Sol being in there is pretty good. Like, they're the two majors that I think if you're going to have an altcoin portfolio, they should have a relatively high level of inclusion. But yeah, and I mean, Cynthia Lummis's bill, that is something that I think it'll be a bit of a hard pass to get through, because she filed that, 2 days ago, essentially saying that she wants to introduce the strategic reserve that I think crypto wants to see, which is the government saying we're going to buy 5% of the supply of Bitcoin. If that goes through, that's bullish. That's like unbelievable. But I do think that, yeah, there's appetite there, but I think getting that through the Senate is going to be, it will be pretty tough. I think there's a lot of pro-crypto Republicans, and Donald Trump's in favor, but I also think there's a lot of old heads in the Senate that are just going to look at this and think, oh, crypto, no thanks, regardless of like party lines. So I think it's a hard sell, but I think given enough time, it can be done.
Yep, and a lot of the rhetoric has been around digital dominance of the US dollar and the role that stablecoins play in that. And that seems to be one of the primary motivations for acquiring ETH or acquiring Sol, or at very least stockpiling ETH and Sol. I think you can make a fairly coherent case that if economies, particularly global economies, move on chain using stablecoins, which we already see, stablecoins have enormous product market fit. It's a phenomenal product, and there's huge demand for dollars all over the world. And right now, stablecoins are arguably the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way to get them. Then there should be some security effort put together, or there should be some effort put towards securing those layer one networks that those stablecoins sit on, and that is on ETH and on Solana. Maybe Tron is something that they might consider too, given the stablecoin volumes on Tron. Tron isn't a US native project or product, so that's maybe why it hasn't been included in the short term. But why XRP and Cardano were included, I think maybe it's a bit more of a mystery, but maybe we'll see. It's yet to be seen. I think this has led to a really significant split, and I think we've seen this developing over the last couple of weeks, maybe even couple of months since the Trump inauguration. But there seems to be this enormous split in terms of sentiment between institutional and retail. This week, the fear and greed index went as low as it's been for a long time. I think since we had a major collapses in 2021, and we're still sitting down at 21 on CoinMarketCap's fear and greed index, which is in the fear zone. And I think we even hit extreme fear zone. We went down to 15. But Bitcoin's still at 83K. ETH has not particularly strong at the moment, particularly compared to 2021 highs. But if you look down the rest of the kind of top 10, top 20, the market's not in a terrible place. Why do you think the fear and greed index is so low right now? Why are retail so bearish?
Well, I think there's, okay, so I'm gonna bring up 2 points here. I'm gonna, forgive me for being a macro guy for a second, but I just think that, in terms of everything that's going on in the world right now, risk markets are not an attractive option to investors. You've got Trump coming out every 12 hours saying, oh, new country's getting a tariff. And risk markets are just like, I don't want to be involved right now. It's too nuts. There's too much uncertainty. I can't guarantee that this is a safe place to park money. I think everyone's just withdrawn. And I think the consensus among a lot of people is this idea that, like, okay, Trump's going to do a lot of unpopular stuff in the first 6 months. And then towards the latter half of the year, that's when we're going to start to see risk appetite. The ending of, QT, bringing back quantitative easing, turning the money printer on, essentially. So I think that's kind of like the main macro conditions. Equities have also been hammered as well. So it's not like this is a crypto only like a crypto specific problem. This is markets around the world. No one's looking at markets and thinking like, oh, sweet, I just want to buy all this stuff at a discount right now. I'm not sure if I want, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this thesis of like, oh, it'll rip at the end of the year. But, you know, I will be looking to buy some things in the next few months. I don't think there's any rush. I'm not rushing in to buy anything too speculative at this point in time. I'm very happy just kind of checking out and touching some grass at the moment. So that's the first one, is the macro environment. And then also I think, you know, fear is really high because everything sold off basically from inauguration. Everything that wasn't Bitcoin dumped incredibly. Meme coins, altcoins, everything just kind of immolated. And so I think that that's a reason as well, is that a lot of market participants, a lot of retail have seen their bags just get absolutely hammered and no one's in the mood to buy. Macro aside, they're just looking at their own felt sense, their own psychology around their portfolio. They probably have a number in their head of what all-time high was, and they're like, oh, it is so far from that. I'm not going back in until I can see a trend reversal. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, unless you held a majority of Bitcoin in your portfolio, it's been a pretty painful couple of months. And even just holding Bitcoin, like we're down, 25 or 30% off that $109,000 high, which in retrospect definitely felt a little euphoric, but in the moment, maybe it didn't feel as euphoric. Maybe it didn't pick up the euphoria as much as you should, but that's okay. You know, if you zoom out, you take a long-term view on this industry and on Bitcoin as an asset, then maybe this is a good opportunity to scoop some up on sale. And yeah, if this sale continues to end a financial year, then yeah, there's some good opportunities in there for all of us. Speaking of what you're buying, let's check in. Last time we had you on the show, there was a fairly strong meme coin allocation in your portfolio. We were joking offline as well before the show about the lessons that you were learning from that. Let's check in on meme coins. What are your thoughts on meme coins? Can they bounce back, or is this narrative now over?
Yeah, first of all, I've learned some lessons about being meme heavy. I've learned a lot. We'll put it down as a learning experience. So yeah, there were things in hindsight that I think were very, very obvious that I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is great. And again, I was talking before about how there's lots of retail people that have an all-time high number. I'm speaking about me. And looking at the market being like, oh, I don't want to go.
I felt the pain in your voice.
Yeah. So in terms of like a meme coin comeback, I'm probably more bearish on memes, just for the midterm at least. Like, again, these are not assets that I'm looking to buy immediately. Again, I'm not looking to jump straight back in. Again, I could be totally wrong, and we can bring this up and have a laugh about it and be like, well, Tom was bearish at the Pico bottom, classic. But I do think that a lot of the catalysts that make meme coins successful have basically vaporized. Like, you essentially want a very, very big organic community of people that own the asset, that are bull posting it. You kind of want a clear chart in the opposite direction. You want to see a nice, strong trend. You also want lots of like really, really big, you know, quote unquote whales holding it, being like, I'm not going to sell. Nothing can shake my conviction, all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of those people have sold, or they're still bag holding. And I think that this is the kind of like second problem with meme coins, is the people that have held a lot down, they're just going to sell into rips. Like, they're just going to see a 20, 30% pump on these things, and they're going to mute price appreciation. Unless something just, you get like some ridiculous God candle across markets where everything goes up almost too quickly for people to sit down and have a think, oh yeah, I want to get rid of this. So I think that the bag holder syndrome on memes is really strong right now, and that any kind of big rips that we see will be sold into pretty quickly. So that's short to midterm. I do think longer term, you know, human greed isn't going anywhere. The propensity to speculate isn't going anywhere. If we do see a return to QE, if we do start to see, you know, stimmies being handed out, that kind of stuff, and people coming back on the internet to gamble on tokens, then sure, that's a catalyst that I would look at and think, all right, time for memes to run again. But in these conditions, I'm happy in stables.
Yeah, it's hard to see a lot of appetite. And I think in the short term too, people have been a bit burned by the insider action, by the combination of that narrative in the Libra coin launch and pump and dump. Like, I can't see a heap of reason why retail are going to go back to that in the short term. But I think people have short memories too, and I think people will forget, and then it'll be on, and there'll be something that attracts attention, and there'll be one story of rags to riches, and people will go back to that space, or the next iteration. We
Yeah.
had NFTs, we had some of those AI agents, then like just pure meme coin speculation. There'll be another iteration. We'll find another way to spin it, and
Yep.
it'll be on again. Given how far down most of the market has drawn and how relatively stable Bitcoin has been, this is my favorite question to ask people right now. Is Bitcoin decoupling from crypto?
Yeah, I would say that it has been for a while. I'd say there's two markets now. Ever since spot ETFs came through, we've just seen it kind of move into a league of its own, where there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else. And I think if we do see like a proper strategic Bitcoin reserve and these kind of actions, I think it's the one crypto asset that people can hold indiscriminately for a long time. It's just one of those no-brainer. The narrative of digital gold has just kind of really dug in. It used to, I think, like kind of be a meme. Like a lot of people are like, oh, it's not digital gold, it's something different. But I do think that now this idea that digital gold, bury it in the backyard, buy it, forget about it, add it to a portfolio as 1%. That's kind of the narrative. And you don't see that for any other asset. So I think that, and there's also no real, competitor risk for Bitcoin, despite what Jason Calcana says. Oh, there's room for another Bitcoin. No, there's not, dude. There's one Bitcoin. It's the one that the government's acquiring and stacking, and same with it's the one that has institutional ETFs. So I think that it's the asset that TradFi is very comfortable holding and will continue to get more comfortable holding. Everything else, new blockchains can come along. ETH has very much sat as the smart contract, immutable deployment chain for a very long time, but it got vamped by Solana with meme coins. And so it's like there's always a competitor risk with the other assets of another blockchain can gain traction, you can build applications on it, and that leaves the door open to something else replacing it. With Bitcoin, I don't see that. It's just digital gold. You buy it, you forget about it. That's it.
Yeah, and you can always improve UX. You can always improve speed and cost. And yeah, I think we definitely saw Solana vamp ETH. The maxis were stoked to point out recently that Bitcoin moved ETH's whole market cap in a day. And I think the ETH BTC ratio is as low as it's been for a very long time, hit a new low today. And so, yeah, it's really one asset versus the rest. I agree with you.
Yep.
Let's zoom out with a short and midterm outlook. You touched earlier on maybe being short-term neutral to bearish. What do you think crypto looks like from here for the rest of the year?
So I kind of sit in the camp of being like dangerously perma bullish all the time. I don't have, if I'd made it, I'd have a different view, which is not the correct thing to approach market with. But I do think in this sense of like, I will be looking for opportunities where I can find them, not right now. But I do think that like, sitting and waiting patiently and trying to figure out when the market's moving again in a way, like it's the same thing that happened towards the end of 2022 when you had everything wipe out and everyone was like, holy shit, it is so over. It wasn't, there were people there that were just bidding the Christ out of BTC ETH and they did quite well. I'm not sure that it's as clean cut as this. It's a lot murkier now. There's less like, oh, well, we've had FTX blow up. All the bad actors are gone. You can just stack. This time it's a lot more, oh, but institutions have bought. There's a strategic Bitcoin reserve and price is still going down. So I think it's a very, very confusing time. But I do think in the next 3 to 6 months, there will be, a lot of opportunity. And I do sit in the bullish longer term camp. We have a pro crypto president. We're about to have an SEC that is going to kind of demystify a lot of the regulatory kind of crap that we had with the Gensler-led SEC. That's had its own downsides with crime is legal now kind of things. But I do think that on a longer enough time span, we're going to start to see, a lot of pro-crypto moves from the government that will make it less terrifying for devs to build stuff without waiting for a Wells notice from the SEC and being like, oh, great, I'm going to go bankrupt if I have to fight these guys. So I think there's a lot of innovation yet to come. I think there's a lot of good news waiting. We just have to see whether or not Trump wants to continue to isolate the US from the world, and whether or not this is just like a performative thing that he's doing at the start of his term to kind of establish himself as the guy. Unfortunately, I do think a lot of it depends on macro conditions at the moment. But I think in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll start to decouple from that once the market starts to, gain a bit of risk appetite. But it all depends on what happens with the US and whether or not Trump just keeps saying like, all right, everyone, it's the US's world and you're living in it.
And I keep coming back to the parallels between, or the lack of parallels between the COVID ZERP free money era and the post-COVID high interest rate, high cost of living, housing crisis kind of world. You had a great episode on your show, Not Gonna Make It, a podcast with Jackson Zhang from Caleb Brown, where you broke down what's kind of going on locally and how Australian dollar debasement's impacting people and their everyday ability just to live, let alone invest. And I still think most people I know are still considering cost of living, cost of housing as their primary problems and the primary place that their funds are going. And I think that is a phenomenon that we're seeing kind of across the Western world. It's not something that's restricted locally to Australia. And so for as long as that is a primary motivator or a big piece of attention that people are paying in terms of where they're going to spend their money and what they're going to do and what they're going to even learn about and research, I don't think we're going to see the same kind of true crypto bull market as we saw in 2021. But eventually that will turn. There's always market cycles. There's always business cycles. There's always liquidity cycles. And when it does, I think we'll know it and we'll feel it. And the energy will be different. And the energy will be back to that kind of 2021 feel. Yeah, man. Sit, wait, stack, hey?
That's it. Yeah, well, with COVID, like it was literally you had everyone locked inside being given money by the government. It's a very, very like unique scenario where it's like, what are people going to do? They're bored. Cost of living crisis, hadn't yet entered the conversation because it came from that. It came from the government spending during that time. So I think that kind of like up only buy whatever and it'll do 100x. That exact scenario probably not going to play out again. We'll see something similar. There'll be more appetite for something in the future, but this idea that the entire world is just sitting locked inside with money to deploy on the internet, I think that's something that I don't think we're going to see again anytime soon, unless there's another pandemic, in which case
I mean, the opportunity for a global crisis to be manufactured or amplified is definitely right here. We're in the kind of environment that something like that could take hold again, and who knows what's around the corner. Black swan, white swan, brown swan, like we've had the last couple of weeks.
Brown
but anyway,
swan. Let's
It's
Yep.
anyway, mate. It's good to hear your take. It's great to catch up, hear what you're thinking about the market, and yeah, get some insight on the goings on in the US. Thanks so much for coming on the show as always.
Anytime. Pleasure.
Well, one last thing, guys, that I'm going to share with you before we log off and leave you to the rest of your week. We are hiring another intern, Tom, if you are interested.
Ooh,
Hiring another
Binance
intern in Australia and New Zealand. Our current intern, Orlando, who's been featured on the show a few times, has graduated. He's moving into the global content team. So a massive congratulations to him. But that means we do need to replace his role with another social media and community intern. The TLDR is you will be on a full-time and it's a paid internship on around a 6-month contract with an option to extend. You'll be working with myself, Jenny Kong, and James Quinn Kumar, and that's our local marketing team. There's 4 of us, including you. And you'll be working on community, social events. You'll be working on a bunch of other areas of marketing as well. So if that sounds like you, if you're a recent graduate or a current student, or if you know someone, please make a referral. Come and join us. Come and work for Binance. It's a pretty good place to be in the bull market and in the bear market. So yeah, guys, come join the team if you're keen. And we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again, Tom. Thanks again, Binantians. We will catch you next week. Bye.
Catch everyone.
Please note that this discussion includes insights from non-affiliated third parties and key opinion leaders. Binance provides this platform for informational and educational purposes only and is not responsible for any content or insights provided. This information should not be considered as financial, tax, or investment advice from Binance.